And welcome back to my 3-minute sermons. This week's portion is Parshat Noach. Talks about the destruction of the world via the Great Flood and the fact that God saved Noach and his wife and children, and everyone else got destroyed. At first glance, Noach seems like an outstanding fellow. The rest of humanity is utterly decadent, yet Noach remains true to his values and is completely unaffected. Whilst the rest of the world is committing atrocity after atrocity and society at large has completely broken down, Noach is called a tzaddik, a righteous man. And as they say, the rest is history. The world gets wiped out in a flood, and Noach and his family are the only ones that God saves. Now one would imagine that after the flood, when things had finally calmed down and Noach was able to disembark and start the world again, we'd hear great things from this guy. But the life he lived after the flood was nothing remarkable. In fact, pretty much the only thing we are told about him after the flood is that he plants a vineyard, gets drunk, and is humiliated by one of his sons. Not the sort of grand ending we'd expect from this impressive fellow. So the question is, where did Noach go wrong, and what message is the Torah trying to teach us with this story? If we analyze the story a little more closely, as indeed the rabbis do, some clues begin to emerge. The Torah doesn't spell this out clearly, but the Medrash tells us that God commanded him to spend 120 years building the ark. 120 years! The ark was incredibly large, but it definitely should not have taken him 120 years to build. And even if it did, why couldn't God be a little kinder to this guy and build the ark for him? Remember, he's 480 years old. Surely he could do with the extra help. The answer, my friends, is that when Noach was commanded by God to build the ark, God wanted him to take responsibility and prevent the world from being destroyed. Noach was to try and heal the broken world, and he had a long time to get it done. You might think it's impossible, but the truth is, when you work on building an ark for 120 years in your front garden, and you're not known amongst your neighbors or friends to be a lunatic, people will begin to wonder what on earth you're doing. They will ask questions. Noach had 120 years to answer those questions, to warn people and steer them away from their ways. But he failed. God says, I'm going to destroy the world, and Noach says, fine. God says, build an ark and I'll save you and family, and Noach says, fine. He didn't take responsibility for those around him. And his name somewhat gives his nature away. Noach means to rest. He was a man of comfort, and stepping out of his comfort zone wasn't for him. As a result, this week's Haftorah refers to the flood as Noach's flood, as if to say that to a certain extent, he was to blame. Contrast that with Abraham, our forefather Abraham. God says, I'm going to destroy the city of Sodom, and Abraham fights back. He doesn't say, well, that's fine because at least I'm okay, but he takes responsibility and cares about those around him. Noach comes and goes, but Abraham still exists, and he exists through his descendants, us. As Jews, we have to remember that we are not here to be too comfortable. That's for the grave. We are here to take responsibility and never feel too cozy with status quo. So whilst the flood of coronavirus is swelling outside, and we all have been protecting ourselves in the arks of our own homes, we have two choices. We can be like Noach and shut ourselves away from the world, or we can be like Abraham and take responsibility. Take responsibility first and foremost for ourselves and for our own well-being, but also take responsibility for our family and friends and for society at large. The world needs us now more than ever, and no human being is too small to make a difference. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom and a fantastic week ahead.